How to Level Up, a comprehensive guide to progressing in your career as a software developer. I'm Brett, and this is a topic I've been thinking about for so long. Like, whether it's at work and I'm thinking about how do I level up, whether it's my colleagues, people I'm mentoring, people watching these videos, I just really have done a lot of thinking about how to level up. I've talked with different teammates and managers and bosses and just feel like I have some good thoughts on what this looks like, because it can feel a bit abstract and hazy, especially when you're early on in your career. Maybe you're just starting out and you're a junior developer and you're curious, how do I level up to become an intermediate developer? Or maybe you're a senior developer and you're thinking, what's beyond? And how do I get there? And what happens next? So that's what I want to talk through and share, because there is a way to go about this that is less abstract and is more clear, and you'll see yourself growing and learning, and you'll be able to advocate for yourself, and you'll have people that can advocate for you too. So let's get right into it. Now, I tend to think of leveling up and levels as RPG characters where you have different stats, and maybe those stats, instead of attack, defense, speed, and special like in Pokemon, maybe they're more like front-end skills, back-end skills, systems programming, database, DevOps. And I've done a whole separate video on explaining different developer roles and talking more about this RPG stats idea. And just like how you might train your Pokemon or your Final Fantasy party members and see them level up, you need to train yourself and level up. But the thing is, you won't exactly know when you've leveled up, right? There's no jingle, there's no distribution screen of your new stats. It's a little less clear than that, but there are still some signifiers of when that happens. So I want to talk to you and share about how you level up, how you train yourself, because that is the key to leveling up. The first thing is, you got to understand, why do you want to level up? Sure, maybe you want to make more money, and yeah, that does come with higher levels. That's great, but it's got to be more to it than that. If you're only motivated by making more money, then I think you would probably pursue things differently, and your motivations would be a little less pure. And it's a totally fine motive, but there just has to be more to it than that, right? You have to be ready for the responsibilities that come with being a higher level, and you have to be hungry and excited for more complex problems. If you're just trying to level up to get the salary bump, but it's going to be depressing and difficult and you don't enjoy the work, having more responsibilities isn't going to make your life better, right? Like, there comes a point where making more money isn't, like, if your happiness decreases but you're making more money, that equation, as time goes on, the balance becomes different. So just be clear about, like, why do you want to level up, right? That's where you got to start, is just why. So let's get into it. Now, there are 5 ways to level up, and we'll just get right into this, and it'll go more into depth. But these are like the key 5 ways to start. Now, the first one is write more code. This may seem obvious, but it's really important because it's the main way you'll get better. The only way you'll get better at being a software developer is by writing more code. It's just like if you're learning how to play guitar. The only way you're going to get better at playing guitar is by playing the guitar more. It's just the nature of it, right? Is that as you build things and work with it more, you begin to understand it more, or you ask different questions because you've solved and understand different concepts. So you have to write more code, which we'll talk more about, but those are ways to do that are things like having personal projects, contributing to open source, taking on projects at work that require more coding, but you have to get better at coding. That is just a very fundamental first step for leveling up as a software developer. And that doesn't matter if you're a junior who just started yesterday or if you're a senior developer. The depth that exists in software engineering is so deep and the breadth is so wide that I really think you could do this for 30, 40 years and still be learning new things because of the industry changing and technology changing and best practices shifting and changing. It's not like accounting where you like understand the basics of it and then can do that career and have a pretty good grasp on it. Yeah, you can go to expos and learn things, but accounting might be a bad example. I'm not trying to throw shade at accountants. Second one is studying programming. This is directly related to writing more code, but you have to keep learning and you have to keep studying because of that depth and because of that breadth and just the sheer amount of things you could learn, that keeping up and learning it is really important. You have to have relationships and talk to and learn with people who are more experienced than you because they will be able to help guide you. And I think about it like with each wave of developers, hopefully each wave should have an easier time learning and growing because they've learned from those that came before them. And instead of going and spending time learning this topic or that topic or whatever, like instead of learning assembly or whatever, the next generation learned C or C++. And then, maybe there's less C++ learning happening, and now maybe it's more Rust or C#, and those languages are a little bit more friendly and easier to get into. And so learn from those who have done what you're trying to do before. Fourth is improving your non-technical skills on relationships. This is so important, and honestly, maybe it should be the second one on this list in hindsight, because a lot of your level, there's not some standardized body that says, oh, this person, you have X, Y, and Z skills, you're a junior. You have these skills, okay, now you're an intermediate. A lot of it is about relationships, and it's about fulfilling the needs of the company that you work at. And if you're able to kind of grow within that system and improve within that system and gain more knowledge there, and you have a good relationship with your boss, like that makes a big difference. Now, is having a better relationship with your boss and is that equitable? No, it's not equitable. But like the reality is that unless you work at a place that's really progressive, that has an unbiased peer and managerial review process to evaluate technical skills that don't account for like biases, then this matters. Like, and it's sad to say it, but it is important in that. So there's like the relationships aspect, and then there's the non-technical skills, which that is something measurable and that you can work on too, and that's important as you level up too. But yeah, the human side of it is very important, and it can be a little messy and frustrating at times. So I've got some thoughts and ideas on how to navigate that. Fifth is you got to make yourself indispensable, right? Like, so much of programming it's this feeling of like, we're using the same tools, the same technologies, we're standardizing so that developers can be replaced, right? Like someone who knows Rails can come in and right away they can pick up the speed, and like that feels like, oh, well, if I'm just another Rails developer or whatever developer, you feel like you could just be replaced, right? And that feeling of just being like a ho-hum, do what I need to do to get by, that is not going to help you level up. What you got to do is make yourself indispensable to the place where you work, wherever you work. And I've got some thoughts on that too. So let's keep going. So leveling up can take years. It can feel like a long journey between levels, but you will get there if you keep at it. It might take 3 or 4 years before you go from intermediate to senior, and that time will be dependent on how much effort and energy you put into it, right? The difference between 2 years and 6 years could be how much energy you invest in this. And I think what you'll find is that if you follow these steps, not only will it go faster, but you'll enjoy working more, because those early years of being a software developer is being frustrated, being confused, not being sure why things aren't working, and then you have to go and reach out for help. And you still need to ask for help as you level up, but when you're early on, it can be really frustrating. But when you pass that initial learning curve and get to the top of that first hill, things get better. So not only will it go faster, but I think it's more enjoyable too. But it can take time. But the flip side of that is you have to beware of complacency. You can, and I've seen this at so many places I've worked, you can just start coasting, right? You do the bare minimum, what's asked of you. You don't learn new things. You kind of have a way of working and you know it works. Yeah, sure, maybe it could be done better, but you can get it done, and that's totally fine. And then those are people who are at the same level for, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 years. That's what I've noticed is with those people is that they're not doing their best work. They're not bringing their best self to their work, and they're it's a little bit checked out. And I think those are people that aren't very fun to work with. They're it's tough because on one hand, those people are reliable and they're showing up, and that's a big part of it is showing up. But I tend to think about it as like, I want to keep growing and keep getting better, and I'm motivated by that desire for knowledge and improvement. But you can just hit this plateau and sort of coast and be an intermediate dev for 10 years, and it's just it can happen. I've seen it happen. There are phases of times where I go through and I'm not engaged in my career development, and work doesn't feel as good. Like, I don't enjoy it as much. I don't enjoy programming as much when I do that. So beware of it. And if you're in this, if you're in this state, maybe this will kind of kickstart the engine to move forward. You got to look at those around you, whether it's in the community you're working with. Like if you're working in the Rails community, look at the best Rails developers and watch their presentations and their talks, read their blog posts, follow them on social media and see what they're sharing. At your company, look at the more senior developers, those who have more experience or work in a different way or approach things in a different way, and like, what can you learn from them? What type of work do they take on? What type of skills do they have? How do they compose themselves and act, and sort of like, what's their style of working? And, not only look at them, but talk to them, and we'll get more into that in a bit. But that's a really good metric and gauge, especially at a company, because if you're an intermediate dev and then there are all these senior devs, and you want to be a senior dev, if you look at the senior devs, try to identify what's different between the way they're working and the way you're working, and that can help you pinpoint what to focus on. Now, the flip side to that is, if you're an intermediate dev and you look at all these senior devs and you're like, I'm doing the same things they're doing and then some, well, that's a problem, and that's a conversation to have with your manager. And that's something where you want to document it and have examples and pinpoints and show the receipts of why you should be a senior dev, right? Like, there's a difference. Part of this is, there's two aspects of here. One is learning and growing. Second is advocating for yourself and getting other people to help advocate for you. And if you're already at a level, or you feel like you should be at a level, you have to be able to get feedback. You have to be able to have honest, frank conversations about it, but you still have to keep learning too. So those things go together. Here's what to look for as you're leveling up, and these will help you gauge, okay, yeah, I've grown. I can look back and see from 5 years ago, I've gotten better in these ways. One is that your quality of work will increase. So the stability of it, aka less bugs and defects, the correctness of it. So does this accurately represent the data in a way that is not only useful, but accurate and able to stand for a long time? Test coverage. The code you're writing becomes easier to change because you are aware that it's likely that it may need to change, so you want to write better code to do that. The speed at which work is completed increases. So if you give a project to a junior developer and a senior developer, the time it takes to do that work will be much less for the senior developer. So the speed at which the work is completed is a factor. As you level up, you'll have less time being supported by teammates, and you'll spend more time supporting your teammates. And this starts to flip, and it depends on your team makeup, right? If you're an intermediate dev and there are a lot of junior devs, you spend more time pairing with the junior devs. That's going to help you grow. It's going to help them grow. And yeah, maybe you need to go to the more senior devs and get support too, but that balance starts to shift. And that's a way to know that you're starting to change your level. You're going to start work that isn't something that maybe someone asked you to do, right? Like, if you're a junior dev, you're just trying to get your bearings and understand the work, and you're trying to show up, you're trying to get things done. But as you're a senior dev, you're anticipating things that are happening, like maybe, oh, there's a security vulnerability in Rails. Oh, we need to upgrade Rails. Great. Oh, Ruby 3 has significant performance improvements. We need to upgrade to Ruby 3. And that might not be something that your manager or the CTO or the engineering director prioritizes. But as a more experienced dev, that having a higher performant programming language and runtime has benefits for our customers and then for the business, and that the amount of time to upgrade it isn't that much. So you make the case to do that, or you just go ahead and do it. And self-starting that important work is a major sign of people who are more experienced. And then your depth of understanding of your code bases at where you work and the tools that are internal, but also of the libraries, the frameworks, and the languages that are used. You become experts in them, and that is a sign that you're leveling up. Also, related to that is that you spend less time looking at the documentation because you have it internalized. And being able to memorize the standard library isn't super valuable because you can just quickly look it up, but there's less friction between what one is thinking and what one needs to do and then the code that they're writing, the more you level up. Number 6 is understanding how the work you do fits into the business strategy of the project, the team, and the business. This is that, non-technical skills, but you need to understand that on any given day, when you open up your editor and you're writing code, what impact is that having on the business? And why are you doing this? Is this helping your team work better? Is this helping the business do something better, accomplish some sort of goal? And it can be really motivating to understand that you're going to do something that then affects people, and hopefully it helps them. Hopefully you're not working for like an evil corporation or something, but and maybe by thinking about the work you're doing in the bigger picture, maybe you'll come to understand the place you work isn't a good fit for you and what you want to do. But you don't want to just be heads down, I just do the pivotal story or the linear issue or the JIRA ticket, right? You really want to understand and ask the question, well, why are we doing this now? Why don't we do this later? Or why don't we do this other thing instead? And understand why it's a priority. Maybe you won't have a say in what the priority is, but you should at least understand it. And hopefully you work at a place where if you don't agree with it, you can at least voice that and make it clear that you're thinking about things beyond just the code you're writing, because that is so important. As you level up too, your communication skills will get better. And that's directly related to number 6. It's directly related to number 3 of spending time with teammates and pairing with them. It's related to reviewing code. Like your communication skills are major. And then you will inevitably start working more sustainably. So instead of having these like big pushes of like, oh, we got to get this done, there's a deadline or whatever, as you get more experience and you're able to complete work quicker, I think you start to understand how you can pace yourself and how you realize like this career of software development, even though we work in these things called sprints, these cycles of work that's planned out, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. And if something doesn't get completed in a certain sprint, like that's okay, there's another sprint. And what matters is that over the course of a few weeks, over the course of a few months, over the course of years, that you're able to improve things, make things better, ship code that's useful to people, that helps the business or helps your customers or whatever it is that, you're writing code to do. And that it's about that long-term sustaining it. And you need to sustain your career and sustain your interest and sustain your growth. You can't just go and be like, today I'm going to level up. I'm going to, go really hard. I'm going to stay up all night watching videos or coding this thing and then, totally lose interest because you're burnt out. You got to sustain yourself. And I think what I see is that more senior developers pace themselves and understand that it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. And that's such a cheesy saying, but I think it's said so much because it's true. And you got to pace yourself, bite off a little bit at a time. Let's get more into these details. The first step, you have to talk with your manager. Your manager is the person who is determining your level, right? At most situations. If you're self-employed, if you're a freelancer, it doesn't matter what level you are, right? In terms of outward perception, anyone can just say they're a senior developer. It doesn't matter in the case of a freelancer or whatever, but if you work at a company and you have a boss and you have a manager and they're determining your level, you need to talk with them. You need to understand what you need to do to level up in their eyes, right? Whoever the gatekeeper is, you don't want to be combative with them and be frustrated, right? You want to be in conversation with them and understand what it is they think you need to do to level up. And what they think you need to do and what you think you need to do and what I think you need to do, those 3 things might be different. But the thing is, you have to be aligned with the person who's going to tell you what level you are, right? And who's going to give you a promotion or not. That supersedes every single thing I'm about to say. Because if they think you need to go and do X, Y, and Z, I'm saying you need to do A, B, and C, what I say doesn't really matter, right? What matters is the person who's going to promote you. And that's unfortunate, but it's true. But to me, the reality is your manager's job is to support and mentor you. I think you can have this really combative, oh, my manager's always telling me what to do. They're really micromanaging, whatever. They're not supportive. And to me, that's a red flag that your manager is not a good manager for you, right? They might work for other people's work styles and their needs, but it might not work for you. And identifying that is really important because having worked at a handful of different places, I've probably employed at 6 or 7 different companies and had 10 or more managers at different times. And the reality is that different managers, your experience with different managers will be wildly, vastly different. And you want to find a company that you enjoy working for, and you want to find a manager that you enjoy working for. That is so key. There's a saying, if people don't leave jobs, they leave managers. And if your manager is not there to support you and mentor you and guide you and help you level up, that's a red flag. That's a sign. It's a sign it's time to move on. So, keep that in mind, right? The best manager there, they will be in your court, they will be on your side of the ring, and they will want to be there to help see you succeed. So here's what you go to your manager and you say, in your next one-on-one, and the next time you talk with them, you say, manager, I'd like to work towards leveling up and becoming an X-level developer. I know it'll take focus and dedication, but I'm ready. Can you help guide and support me through that process? That's all you have to say, right? Make it clear you want to level up, and then you ask for help. And if you're afraid to ask for help or guidance or support, you're going to have a really hard time leveling up, because that's the only way we get better is by support and guidance and asking for help, right? It's really okay to ask for something. That's why your manager is employed, is to be there to support their team members, to help enable them, especially as developers, to do their best work. So that's what I'd say. And I would say it verbatim. I would write it down, and then in my one-on-one, I'd show up on the video call and I would say this out loud and say, what can you do to help me? Your manager should know what skills you need to focus on to learn and grow, right? You've been having one-on-ones with them for months, years. They know you. They know what you're struggling with, what you're good at, where you're leaning towards in terms of what you're strong at. Maybe you could bolster these things, right? Maybe they noticed, you don't know a lot of SQL. Okay, learn SQL. Oh, here are some, resources to help you learn SQL. Okay, let's check in, right? And what they should be able to do is create something that I think of as your dev roadmap. You should be able to start at that red triangle, and they should be able to identify, here are some things I noticed that you don't know or you've expressed interest in. Don't try to learn them all at once, right? Time is linear. Let's move through. Let's learn SQL. Okay, let's get better at that. Let's get better at regex. Okay, let's understand how Linux works because we're deploying the Linux servers, and understanding process managers and how the file system works. Thinking about performance and API design. Maybe tests are in there, right? Whatever it is, you should be able to go to your manager and define a path of how you get from your current level, if you're a junior developer, how you get from a junior developer to becoming an intermediate developer. And they should be able to align, any good manager, any manager worth their salt should be able to go and list these things out. And not only do that, but give you resources, information, and support on how to do this. And then you should have regular check-ins with your manager where you can share your progress, share what you're learning, share your wins, share things where you fell short. And you should be able to get feedback and guidance. Your manager should be your biggest supporter, in my opinion, right? And I would keep track of that learning. I would share it with your manager. I would show up to those one-on-ones or those meetings, and I would just make it clear, hey, boss, I've been working on learning regexes. I, went through this resource, this course, and I built a regex for identifying phone numbers. I know it supports international phone numbers, whatever, right? Make it known what you're doing and keep track of it yourself. I made a video on how I organize my technical learning. Here's an example. I use Trello, and I have these lanes, and I just go through and I focus on one thing at a time. And, you have to be intentional about what you're learning. You can't just accidentally stumble into becoming a senior developer, right? There are so many concepts that I think to be the most effective and have it go as quickly as possible, organize yourself. Next up is finding a mentor. Whether it's within your local community through meetups or conferences, maybe it's someone online, maybe it's someone you check in with regularly. You need to have someone who has been through similar experiences as you that you can ask for feedback, share what's going well, what's not going well. This is like, a sort of cousin to your boss. But maybe, you're less close. Maybe you have less frequent check-ins, but it's someone you can just get a reality check from. This is building those relationships, having this mentor is really important because they will be able to give you this sort of guidance, this sort of feedback. It can be hard to find a mentor, and maybe not everyone will be able to find one, but I really think it makes a huge difference and will be really helpful to you because you want to have someone who wants to help and support you, right? But that's not their job. You want someone who wants to have that relationship and wants to mentor people. And as you progress in your career, if you've had mentors, make time to mentor and share your knowledge with other people. Now, this is just the reality, which is that if you want to level up, if you feel like you're at a plateau or you feel like there's not the opportunity to level up where you are, it's time to find a new job. There will be other opportunities. You will be valued differently at different workplaces. So at your current job, if you feel like, I'm ready to be a senior dev, but that's just not an opportunity here, maybe there's promotions aren't happening that way, or maybe, you've hit the ceiling or whatever, you need to apply to other jobs, interview with places, and at least see what happens and understand what gaps you're missing. But finding a new job is honestly a really effective way to get paid more, understand what your value is in terms of, the marketplace, and a lot of that stuff's phony baloney, but also getting a higher paycheck can be really helpful to people. So, be aware that that's an option, and that's an effective way of leveling up. You can't be afraid of making mistakes. That is one of the key ways you will learn things. When I started at a new job once, I went and booted up a console and ran a database query that was really long running, so long running that it took up so much memory and processing power that it crashed the application. And yeah, I was embarrassed. And yeah, you don't want to bring the application down, but the reality is that you're going to make mistakes and you're going to learn. You're never going to forget the time that you brought the application down because it hurts and it has an emotional scar that you then learn, okay, I'm not going to make that same mistake again. So you can't be too afraid of making mistakes. Now, there are some mistakes that are extremely severe that you need to be extremely cautious about that your teammates, your more senior teammates, will be on the lookout for. Things like personal information leaking, credentials leaking, insecure operations, access control. But you got to realize you got people supporting you. And you need to be aware of not trying to make those mistakes, but you can't just be afraid to do something because you're worried you're going to mess it up. A lot of mistakes are recoverable. A lot of mistakes aren't catastrophic. So don't be too afraid of them, but be diligent because some mistakes can cost the business, hundreds of thousands of dollars. So you got to be, there's a weight to being a software engineer, especially depending on where you're working. I would study programming every single day. You show up to work every day. That's a habit, right? You start the day, maybe you check your email, maybe you check Slack, maybe you check Hacker News or Reddit. Well, instead of checking Hacker News or Reddit, do some studying, do some reading. What if you learn about a library and standard library? What if you go through and read a chapter of a book? What if you work on a little hobby project, right? Even if it's just 20 minutes a day, after a week, after a month, after a year, that time adds up. And what you'll notice is that if you're learning things, even if it's not directly related to the work you're doing or the programming languages you use, it will make you write better code because you'll see things in a different way and you'll be able to understand it more. So keep studying, keep learning, and then share what you learn. Share it with your teammates. Set up a TIL channel on Slack to share little snippets or things you learn. Start a blog, start a YouTube channel. By sharing what you learn, it makes sure that you understand it enough to then share it with others, which, similar to making mistakes, is a really effective way to understand what it is you've learned. So share it. And that is part of leveling up, is not only did I use this snippet I found on Stack Overflow, but okay, I understand what that snippet does. I understand enough to explain why it did that. You're not just copying code senselessly from the internet, pasting it and hoping it works, right? As you get more experience, you'll understand why that is, and it's really, really valuable. And focus on the fundamentals. I've got a list of fundamentals to focus on, but with the world of software development, where so much changes so rapidly, New libraries, new frameworks, new languages, new paradigms. These things shift so quickly that if you aren't keeping up, it can feel like you're getting left behind. But I think there's a way to step back, take a deep breath. Yes, okay, I'm not checking Hacker News every single day. I'm not checking Reddit 3 times a day. I'm not worried that, this new, library or approach of doing things is going to just invalidate everything I've been learning, right? Take a step back. It's okay. There are fundamentals that change pretty slowly or don't change very much at all. And you got to focus on those things, right? Especially if you're a junior or intermediate developer. Focus on the fundamentals. These are things like the standard library of the language you're using, the frameworks and the libraries that you're using, right? If you're learning Ruby, you're working on a place that does Ruby on Rails, learn Ruby really well, right? Those internals of Ruby, the standard library, do not change very frequently. It's very valuable to know those. And as you learn those, a lot of other programming languages have similar standard libraries that you can use. And those being in your toolbox is really helpful. If you're doing Ruby on Rails, learning Rails and any of the libraries you use, really valuable stuff, right? Where if you're not changing Rails on a monthly basis, right? You're not swapping Rails out for something else. Maybe there's a big rewrite or something, and maybe you do, but generally, if the code you're writing is relying upon some core foundational technologies, learning those will be really helpful. Read and learn about data structures and algorithms. Get good at testing your code, because no matter what paradigm your code follows, you will need tests to verify it does what you intend it to do. And being able to go and have that confidence that the code is working and that you can make changes and refactor things without breaking it, immensely valuable regardless of if it's functional, imperative, or OO, or whatever, right? Like, very important. Performance and benchmarking, that will give you a depth of skill and knowledge that similarly will apply no matter what the technologies are that change. And then you gotta know your platform. If you're building web applications, you gotta know the web, you gotta know HTTP. If you're building iOS applications, you gotta know those APIs and those SDKs and Swift or Objective-C or whatever, right? Like, you gotta know your platform well. So focus on learning those things, focus on what doesn't change, and get really good at those. And then as things are shifting and, there's lit components instead of stencil components or whatever it is that exists and changes and happens, you'll be able to pick those up pretty quickly because you understand what's below the surface of those things that change so frequently. A really great book on this is The Pragmatic Programmer. This is a book, it's been around for over 20 years. A lot of it stayed the same. Some of it changed in those 20 years, but this book is it's not a surface level, it's like a medium depth level overview of important concepts as a software engineer. I would really recommend reading this book, especially if you're a junior intermediate developer. It will help you immensely and will give you more guidance to those things I just shared than I was able to. Next up is learn a new language. A new language can be a new way of thinking, especially if it's something of a different style or paradigm. Like if you're used to writing Python and it's a dynamically typed language, and then you go and you learn Rust and it's statically typed, see how that feels. See what it's like writing code. Is it frustrating? Is it empowering that you have more confidence in the type of code that's being passed into your functions? Like a lot of languages exist to solve a problem. Maybe they didn't like the ergonomics of a different language. Maybe it was too slow. Maybe they're tired of null pointer references, whatever, right? Something motivates companies and people to write new languages to solve new problems. And those problems are likely different than the language you use. Otherwise, we'd just have one language that exists. So oftentimes, a new language is a new way of thinking, and that by learning it, you will acquire new skills and mindsets that you can then bring back to what your main language is. Similarly, contribute to open source. It's another way to write more code. It's another way to get your code out there into the world. It's a way to help other people. It's a way to show that you can build and maintain something that you're not required to do. You'll have to work with other people across the world of different languages and communication styles, different standards. It's really valuable to go and step outside of the bubble of where you work and write code with other people and collaborate with them. It's also a way to network and make friends and become part of your community. And then to write more code, you gotta start and you have to finish side projects. Stretch your skills, try a new language or a new framework, try to finish those projects. It's okay if you don't. you'll still learn something. But if you finish and launch and maintain a side project, maybe that's an open source project, that will make an immense difference because you'll have this skill and this experience of building something that other people haven't, and you'll be forced to learn and understand something that you didn't otherwise. So take on side projects and try your darndest to finish them. You can make them open source, you can write about them, you can write about what you've learned, whatever it is, really, really valuable. I made a book called Project Book. It's at bit.ly/projectbookbc. You can see it. It's got over 100 ideas for learning any language, any technology. They're just ideas of what to build if you're feeling uninspired. But you know you want to learn, Django or Rust or Go or whatever, right? Okay, let's get into building your non-technical skills because this isn't as clear and as obvious as getting better at programming, right? Writing more code, doing side projects, pretty clear. But your non-technical skills, these are things like design, understanding the UX of your application, and understanding, being able to communicate with designers about why things are done a certain way, being able to get feedback, being able to build something with minimal design input. Really valuable skill. Having project and product management skills. So immensely valuable. Being able to communicate effectively with your teammates, but also with your non-technical teammates. Your productivity, your work habits, your focus, your network. These are really, really important aspects for growing as a software developer. So first, go to meetups, attend conferences, watch webinars, and get involved with other people. That is what networking is, right? It is about building relationships with other people, making friends, getting to know people, learning new skills from those people. You want it to be genuine, though. You want it to be authentic. You don't want to just be there and try to, everything doesn't have to be a deal. Everything isn't about, trying to get a new job, right? It's about building and maintaining relationships. And you can do that by going to local meetups. You can attend conferences, whether they're virtual or not. Be involved in the chat. If you're attending a virtual webinar, ask questions, share thoughts, follow people on Twitter, and reach out to them. That is how you'll get to know people. And through getting to know people, I had to drink some water. I haven't had any water yet. Through getting to know people, you'll have a network. And through that network, you'll be able to get jobs. And you'll be able to see opportunities that exist. And you'll have trust built between people. And people will follow you to different jobs, or you'll follow them to different jobs. And it's so important. You can just exist by yourself, right? You can write code, and you can be really talented at writing code. And you can get a job, and you can work, and you can have a career. But I think it's a lot better when you have friends and allies and people supporting you and, people you can reach out to for help and support. And the only way you get that is through connecting with people. Let's talk about some valuable non-technical skills. Being a smart, kind person who cares is something that will make a huge difference, right? That's just like default table stakes leveling up. You have to be kind, and you have to care about what you're doing, and you have to try to achieve a depth of skill with what you're doing. Oh, you also have some design skills? So valuable. I have a teammate who primarily focuses on front-end development and is incredibly knowledgeable and just immensely valuable when it comes to doing that work, right? And because of that, time spent on the front end and thinking about it, they have an incredible amount of user experience knowledge. So when they build something, they have thoughts and opinions on, is this effective or could this be made better? And without being told to, they go and they iterate on and improve the user experience of what they're maintaining. And because of this, over time, those experiences become better and better, and it makes a huge difference for the people using the software. And that kind of self-guided, self-directed, taking ownership of something, that idea of being a developer who also knows about and cares about UX, that is making yourself indispensable, right? Just being told what to do and doing it, that's fine. But going and doing something because you know it's the right thing to do, that is making yourself indispensable. Okay, that was a lot. Let me go through these 7 points. You've got to be clear and empathetic in your written and verbal communication. You've got to think about who is receiving what you're writing, especially as we work more and more asynchronous through Slack channels, through Discord, through GitHub pull requests. You have to understand and know who you're talking to and how they're going to receive it, right? If you're talking and giving feedback to someone, you might be making them feel awful. And maybe it's tough to think about how people might receive what you're saying because you feel so strongly about it. But like how you word things and the way you communicate with your team is so important, right? It's the difference between upsetting someone and frustrating them and the difference between building a friend and building trust. And you have to be so aware of what you're saying and how it's perceived. And it's really freaking hard, right? Especially if your first language is different than their first language or your cultures are different. It's really hard, but being an empathetic communicator makes a huge difference. Okay, that's the first one. Second is habits, productivity, focus. You have to be able to show up, focus, do your best work. I've made videos on that. I've talked about that a lot. There's a lot of stuff out there about habits and productivity, and it's you just got to find a system that works for you. Don't worry too much about optimizing this and that and that. You just got to have a system. You got to be able to show up and feel good about it. Networking, which I talk a lot about. Let's talk a little bit about project management. Project management is organizing the work that needs to get done and capturing it in a place and in a system that is visible to other people, but most importantly, it serves you. That you can go and you can make sure that the work that needs to happen to complete this project is comprehensive, documented, and able to be used as a way to support the work you're doing, right? Yes, places hire project managers to help make sure that happens. But if you have those skills and you can self-project manage and you can clearly show to your manager or to anyone who is involved in a project at a higher level, here's the work, it's captured. We've got this shit under control. Sorry, I just cursed. I usually don't curse in these videos, but we've got it under control. And okay, that's a really valuable skill. If you go and you watch some videos on project management or read a book on project management and you show up and you try to organize the work in the system for the work you're doing, that's really a valuable skill. Now, don't show up and try to big dog the room and manage everyone's work. That's a really good way to get your teammates upset, right? You have to find a balance there. But if you, for your project, maybe with your little team, if you can go and organize that stuff, that's super valuable. Product management is different than project management. Product management is understanding why the software does something, having a vision for where you want it to go, and then breaking it down into small chunks, features, and improvements that will make it better over time. So understanding why the software does what it does now, what the limitations are, and then understanding what can we do to make it better, and what are some things we can work on that will add more value to people. So if you're a developer and you're thinking about the product instead of just the code, you're indispensable, right? Like you will not only write better code, you will prioritize and understand trade-offs that you can make in a given day. So instead of being heads down obsessed with the little coding world that you've built, which is very fun and appealing, and I understand it, but if you can step back, zoom out, and understand the context of this thing in the whole, whether it's trade-offs you can make now, or whether it's time to invest on something because you know it will pay off in the end, it'll pay off in a year or two. Those are the kinds of thinking that really matters. UX design, talked a little bit about that, really valuable to know. If you know UI design too, especially as a front-end developer, so majorly important. Number 7 is you just can't be apathetic. You have to care about your work, right? Like, if you don't care, then why are you trying to level up? And not caring will show in the work you do. Things will slip, things will fall through the cracks. It's not just caring, but you can't care too much, right? You can't be obsessed. You can't be working all night. You can't be working on the weekends. You don't want to be blowing past boundaries, but you want to show up during the workday. You want to care. You want to do your best work, and you want to be able to shut that off and say, okay, I'm not working on this work anymore. I'm living my life. And maybe a little bit of that life is studying programming or working on personal projects, but that life also needs to be interacting with others. It needs to be maintaining friendships and relationships. It needs to be having hobbies that aren't just looking at the computer, right? Like, you have to have a holistic life. And you want to be able to show up, care, do your work, and be done. Okay. Here are some non-technical skill resources. These are what I've enjoyed. Maybe it'll help you too. There's so many of these things, so find them. But Rework is a great book that really, early on in my career, helped me reframe how I think about work. I think it holds up well. I've read it a few times. It's very good. Product Management in Practice, a great book by O'Reilly, by Matt LeMay, that will help you think about your work in terms of the product instead of just the code you're writing, if you're interested in that stuff. Nonviolent Communication. This is by Marshall Rosenberg. This is foundational. This is that number 1 point about how you communicate and being an empathetic communicator. This is about sharing your needs, sharing your feelings, and having difficult conversations. Being prepared and being better at having difficult conversations will make the non-difficult conversations even better too. I love this book. I think it is a life-changing book, and love it. It's so important. Elements of style, just on clarity of writing, and a style guide for how to write. That can also be helpful. Getting things done, about productivity. Love that book. Similarly, Back to Work covers a similar topic. The Passionate Programmer talks about a lot of the things I've talked about in this presentation. Highly recommend it. Great book. And then So Good They Can't Ignore You by Cal Newport. That's this idea of making yourself indispensable and doing the work that will make you recognized and help you level up. All right, so being reliable. This is both technical and non-technical. But when you say you're going to do something, do it. Complete your projects on time, and if you can't complete it on time, if there's a hiccup or a roadblock, speak up about it. Don't let it linger and fester, right? You need to be upfront, clear, transparent. It's okay to ask for help. You're not doing this all on your own. It's okay to share when you're stuck. It's okay to share when you're struggling. What matters is that you go through those periods and you're able to rebound, you're able to recover, you're able to move forward. And then project after project, you ship it and you finish it and you communicate it. You build a track record. And then what happens is that your manager knows, oh yeah, I can give this difficult project to this person. Oh, this person's really showed up. Wow, over the last year, they did X, Y, and Z. That's the reliability of all this is so important. That is, to me, a major difference. Okay, we're heading towards the end. This is a lot of stuff, but I hope it's like a boost to what you need if you're thinking about trying to level up. You gotta make yourself indispensable. I keep saying that, but it's so important. Where you work, you want to find a niche and become the expert. It could be on performance, right? Maybe you love the challenges of performance and you love finding, profiling, benchmarking, and optimizing the code you've written. That's so valuable because it will mean less computing resources that are needed to run your application. And maybe that saves money, maybe it doesn't. That can be a little hand-wavy, but it will make it a better experience for your user. And there's a lot of depth that comes with performance. Maybe it's accessibility. Maybe you're really interested in building an accessible application. And you go and you read books and you take courses and you make changes to the code that's being written and you're educating your teammates on how to make your code more accessible, right? That's how you become indispensable. You find the niche, you become the expert, you educate people, you help people, and that's really valuable. And then you can go and say, look, I did all these things over this year. Why am I not a senior developer, right? Like if you're approaching it from the end, but if you're approaching it from the beginning of trying to level up, talk with your manager about that. Build that into it. Just ask for more challenging projects, right? As you're building this relationship with your manager and you're on this path, you're following this roadmap to level up, just straight up ask and say, I would like more challenging projects that stretch me. As you're planning out the work, can you help assign me challenging projects that exercise these skills? That would be really amazing. And maybe they won't be able to every time, right? But they might be able to, maybe half the time, right? And you gotta ask for what you want, right? That's so important. I've mentioned this a little bit, and it's that you need to do the work that doesn't get prioritized, but you know it needs to be get done. This is documenting things. This is improving test coverage. It's things like performance. It's updating dependencies, right? You can fall into this trap where you're using a version of a programming language that's no longer supported and has a ton of security vulnerabilities. But you know what? The CEO probably doesn't know or care about that. So then it just lingers, and you're using this really old, vulnerable piece of software that, it's not a business priority, but there need to be technical priorities that you go and you step up and you try to make better. The same thing goes with the developer experience. If there are ways you can make the development environment better, you can make tooling better, documentation better, you need to go ahead and do that. You need to share that you've done it with the team so they're aware of it. You got to share with your manager and say hey, I spent some time this afternoon trying to, I made this thing better. And this is, that self-directed, stepping up, doing it, not being told, not being asked to do it, it makes a huge difference. Document all the things. If you don't have a wiki, start an internal wiki. It could be as simple as a Git repository. It could be in Google Docs. It could be in whatever resource base you have. Either put it there or establish a new one and document what you learned. Because not only will that help your teammates, not only will that make you indispensable because you are the person who has documented all these things and tried to help all these people, when you hire someone new, be able to point them to a place that has quite a bit of knowledge and information contained, that's empowering for them because they can go see it, figure it out, and they know they don't have to disrupt someone. And just, write documentation. It is a big difference between someone who's just starting out and someone who's been doing it for a long while. Finally, be patient. Keep at this, take breaks, sustain yourself. It's not a sprint, even if the language of building software is that we work in sprints. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon. Be patient, work at it day by day, ask for help, get support. Take breaks if you need them, right? If you're feeling like you're on the cusp of like burning out and being sick of this stuff, take a week off from, studying, or take a week off from your side project. It's okay to take breaks, but get back to it and, keep moving forward. So here's your homework. Go and talk with your manager in your next one-on-one. Use the script I said, which is, I'd like to level up to a senior developer. What can you do to help support me and create a roadmap to get me there? I would really appreciate and value that. You got to find a mentor if you don't have one already, someone at work, and just go to them similarly and say, hey, would you be up for mentoring me? I'd like to just have a call every month. Could we have a call, hour-long call every month? We'll go get coffee, my treat. I just want to share how things are going, get some thoughts, get some feedback. It could be a phone call, it could be a video call. But just find someone and ask them if they can be your mentor. And if they say no, if they're too busy or whatever, that's okay. Ask someone else, right? Like, it's okay to ask for what you want. I hope that is like the biggest takeaway from this is like, ask for what you want. It is totally appropriate and okay, and be kind, be thoughtful, and then take that feedback and turn it into action. Start a side project, study every day, and you got to write more code. So you've got this. I believe in you. You're going to level up, you're going to evolve, and you're going to see yourself transform and become a better developer. But you've got to stick at it, you got to be patient, and you'll do it. And I think it'll get better. I think programming and developing gets more fun the better you get at it. So I hope this is helpful. I really enjoyed talking and thinking about this stuff. Clearly, if I can talk about it for over 50 minutes, and I want to see you all succeed. I want to see you all level up. I want to see you all become better developers because it's a really wonderful and exciting career and hobby, and just a way to live. So that's it. Enjoy. See you next time. Thanks for watching. Take care. Bye.